Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Freedom Over Fascism. It's been a minute since I did a podcast, and I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad you're back. So, today we are going to talk to a writer named Ellie Leonard that you may have already met on Substack. She's been doing a deep investigative dive into Jeffrey Epstein and his client list, and on Ghislaine Maxwell and her recent interview with the DOJ and some of the survivors of the Epstein sex trafficking ring. She's a writer and editor and blogger and a small business owner, and she works with filmmakers, podcasts, and journalists all over the US. She lives with her family just outside of New York and spends her time wrangling 4 kids and is a classically trained pianist. So, we've talked a lot here about the importance of independent investigative journalism
Mhm.
and the failure of legacy media, and about how we all have something to contribute. We've also talked a lot about leading with our values and with empathy, which is why we keep in the front of our minds that behind these lists are human beings who have been abused. You do uh, live Substacks most days with Nick
Mhm.
Paro, also on Substack. So I'm interested in why you decided to do that and why you decided to write a
Mhm.
column um, about things that the legacy media won't touch. Why did you start? And what do you think is important about what you do?
Um, well, it feels like all this has happened very fast. I've really struggled with where my place is with writing. I am raising 4 kids. I am a writer. I am very passionate about politics and what happens in my community. We live in an area with a lot of immigration and how to support people and not just, complain to my television set, but actually make a difference. And so um, I started hearing about this Epstein stuff, and I thought, I wonder how Trump and Epstein really were connected. Like outside of hearsay, outside of these little sound bites and news clips, like how were they connected, and what information can I actually gather on my own? And so I'm a very kind of deep divey, nerdy, geeky person when it comes to stats and mathematics, and I just started searching and searching and searching the internet for things that weren't just on the first page when you Google it, right? And so I made a timeline of all the interactions that are proven between the two of them, whether that's financial, whether that's socially, whether that's photographs, whether that's flight logs, whatever. And I made a timeline from beginning to end from the 90s to the mid early 2000s. And I found things that would be actually reported on later on. I had actually found, not that they weren't available to everyone, but I had things like the party they'd had at Mar-a-Lago with just Epstein and Trump and 28 women, things like that. So I just put it all together. I made it very visual. I always include, links and citations because that's my, training
Well,
in me is to always cite my sources. And so it's really important for me that links mean something and are evidentiary. So I made this list and then I just was like, okay, click, send, publish. And it just kind of went wild. Like as far as where my Substack was at the time, it got for me very viral. And I thought, wow, people are really interested in this story. I wonder what I can find out. And then I started digging into some of Vicky Ward's writing, and Vicky Ward is on Substack as Vicky Ward Investigates. She's fantastic. Has been writing about this for over 20 years, and
oh man.
some of her articles were just like, why is no one talking about this part and that part? And then I started reading, I obviously love Michael Wolff. I've listened to all his interviews. I'm a transcriber, so I really, really want to transcribe all his audio tapes if he ever makes them public. He has 100 hours of Epstein interviews. And then
Maybe
also
we'll make it in public for you.
oh, I would love I've emailed him several times. I'm like, please let me do this. And then Julie K. Brown, who is a reporter for the Miami Herald. And so she did a lot of writing about the sweetheart deal when Epstein was arrested the first time around, which should have been the end of the story, and it wasn't, obviously. And so, like you're saying, like two things come up when I'm writing. Number one is always remembering when we talk about the Epstein files and the Epstein lists and the black books and this and that, is the reason the files are important is because they're stories. And it is that idea of if we believed women, we wouldn't need the files because most of what's in the files are people's stories and evidentiary stories and proof and remembering that they're not just files. They're not just documents in a box somewhere that we need to see. They're people's stories of trauma. And so when we talk about those stories and we talk about all this kind of salacious information that people are digging for, you have to remember that it's someone's trauma that you're digging for and how to focus in on that in a way that helps them as far as justice is concerned, but also respects them and doesn't further traumatize. So those are things that are really important to me as I tell these stories. But then also the idea of not being like a tabloid, right? When I
Right.
write something, I'm always concerned with that. I'm always like, am I just being like a checkout stand? Am I the National Enquirer? Why am I writing this? Am I, I always said I would be a horrible journalist because I don't want to knock on someone's door and stick a microphone in their face. That would make me so uncomfortable. I'm very non-confrontational. Um,
Mhm.
and yet here I am writing about this stuff. I love an investigation, however. And so the idea of digging and finding information that's available, it's available to all of us. It's just not pushed forward, right? They don't want it to be easy to find. And so that's when you see like this legacy media and newspapers and cable news stations, you'll if you know anything about the story, you'll be like, why aren't they talking about that? That's a
Right.
huge missed point. Like with the depositions right now, these interviews that were pushed forward, like why is no one talking about the fact that they gave us the audio with the transcripts? They didn't need to do that. There's
Right.
purpose behind that. They want us to hear emotion and they want us to empathize with a child rapist. And just like analyzing things and not just taking them at their surface. Like, why do we have this? Why are they giving this and not giving this? So it's a lot of that.
And before you had done this intricate timeline,
Mhm.
did you find one out there that somebody else had done, or did you have to piece it together? Are you the first one that's basically pieced it
I mean, I'm
together?
sure there are timelines, but I didn't use another timeline when I pieced it together. I just basically, I mean, there's a lot of tools you can use. Um, I just basically kind of looked up year by year and used, I Googled things using the search tools based on their timelines and specific. Because if you look up something about the flight logs and you just Google, Epstein's flight logs, they will give you the most recent articles from 2025. I wanted to know what they knew in 2007 or 2009, like before before politically things had really infiltrated the story. What were the basic details of this information and what do we have? And then as a transcriber, if I'm given a transcript of something, I'm going to go back and do it myself. So I'm glad I have the audio files. I'm glad I have the original flight logs that are handwritten because I'm not going to necessarily trust their digitized version. I'm going to go back and do it myself and make sure, what's right and what's not right. And there are mistakes. There's mistakes in the flight logs about how they transcribed it. There's mistakes in the audio files of Ghislaine Maxwell, things that they missed that they couldn't hear that I was able to hear.
Do you think that
And
was, intentional, or did they just
mm, I
move
just think
it
that
miss it, I mean?
I I just think that transcribers are a bit of a dying breed, especially in the time of AI. And I think that it's hard to find someone who has done it for maybe as not to toot my own horn, but I've just done it for a really, really long time, and I have an ear for hearing mumbled, garbled wording in the background that has people talking over top of it. Like they missed a lot. Anytime someone interrupted someone and talked over them, they would miss what was said. And I'm able to kind of like hear underneath and be like, oh, I can hear them saying this. Okay. And then I can hear them saying this on top. And so that a lot of that was missed. There was one quote that was missed that I thought was interesting where Ghislaine Maxwell says that they were diving into, there's something called the Serious Fraud Committee or collection or something, but they're out of the UK and they had investigated her early on because she declares that she's very poor when she comes to America. She doesn't have a penny to her name. Her father was never associated with money. She's just living in poverty in a 10 by 10 apartment. happens to have a billionaire boyfriend but never goes to his house. And so she said that she was investigated by this fraud coalition out of the UK about her finances because they didn't believe it either. They weren't like, no, you're not. But she said something like, they said, P.S. Are you Snow White's cousin? And that was totally missed by the transcriber. And it was to indicate that she was like pure as the driven snow and she's totally
Mm.
innocent and nothing's wrong. And I thought that that was a really unique and interesting quote. And I was like, I'm really glad that I found that one in there because that wasn't in the transcripts that were released by the DOJ.
So so you're finding all of this stuff and things are happening. I mean, 2 minutes before we started recording, the House Oversight Committee, is getting things released. And so it's kinda happening in real time. What are you hoping that your close attention to this will do? And I know you're getting a lot of eyes on what you're doing. I first became aware of you last week, and I noticed that a lot of people also had seen you. So in your mind while you're doing this, what is your purpose?
Well, um, I come from a family that is, I think, very typical in this political climate. A lot of misinformation, especially around voting and what they believe to be absolutely accurate information. I think that is a lot of the reason why Trump was elected as easily as he was this time around was people just not knowing how either not looking things up, kind of burying then their heads in the sand, or voting and being informed by word of mouth rather than doing their homework. Like a lot of people said in this past election that, for instance, Kamala Harris had no economic plan, right? That was a thing you heard a
Exa
lot. She has no economic plan. And it was like if you went to her campaign website, she had like an 82-page economic plan in PD. Like it was just right there. It was very detailed. It was very informative. It wasn't legalese. It was easy to read. But nobody looked it up, right? No, people heard from their neighbor that Kamala Harris had no economic plan. My intention with this, and it's why I keep my articles free, I never put them behind a paywall, is I want information to be number one, easily available and accurate as best as I can, and I accept when people message me and say, hey, you made a mistake, look this up, I will. I want that to be easy to understand and easy to read. I don't want to write on a high academic level because I think you lose people and I don't want to lose anyone. Um, but I also want all the details surrounding a certain topic to be able to be found in a single place. In order for me to write this timeline, or in order for me to write about the sweetheart deal, or in order for me to write about Epstein's time at the Dalton School and Harvard, I had to have tabs and tabs and tabs and tabs open at the top of my browser. I don't want people to have to do that. I assume most people aren't going to do that, and so I want to take this information, I want to put it in one place where they can open it and see the whole thing. And it's not killing them to read it, right? Or listen to it or whatever. And that the links are just right there. I don't put my citations at the bottom, which is kind of an older thing we were taught in college. You cite your
Mhm.
sources at the bottom and you do footnotes. I think now with the way technology is, it's if you can link it right in the article so that as they're reading, they can look at it and they don't lose their place and they can continue on. I just try to make things easier for people. You hear a lot that like the reading level has gone down and people aren't as smart. I disagree with that. If you look at newspapers from the early 1900s and when everybody was reading the newspaper, newspapers were written in a simplified manner. They were not textbooks. They were not academic. They were written for the common man. And so when we write something down in a Substack post that however many people are going to read, I want to read it for the average reader, right? And I don't expect that they all went to college. I don't expect that they're all struggling to read, but some are. But I want something kind of right in the middle that's
Mhm.
attainable for anyone to understand. And that's my goal.
You said something that I wanna kinda back up and follow up, and then I wanna come back to
Sure.
what we do with this information. You said that you grew up in a household where people just kind of took their information for granted and just
Mhm.
kind of went on gut and rumor, which is basically how we all do it, right? It's not policy, it's vibes and values. This is but I'm curious about, I heard you when you were talking to Nick at some point saying, that you grew up in a religious community, and I'm
Mhm.
curious if there's any connection there, and if so, what was it? What was kind of the background, and what did your upbringing tell you to think? What do you how did you kind of make a shift if you did?
Mhm.
Or, where is the rest of your family now?
Sure. So we're kind of all over the place. My mom is an evangelical Christian. My dad is an atheist. But this is kind of how it's always been. As far as me, I think there's been just a lot of navigating. At a base level, my Christian faith is still my Christian faith, but there is a lot of deconstruction that happens as you grow. I think you take a lot of things for granted. Obviously, you don't question as much when you're a child. I think a lot of the people that I grew up with in the church that I went to, including people like my youth pastor, have deconstructed what was
Mhm.
taught there and how we navigate that. I really struggle, just for myself, I really struggle with the idea of hijacking a religion for political purposes, which I feel like has happened obviously recently. But I also have to recognize the harms that my religion has inflicted on people who either aren't part of that religion or women or people from the LGBTQ community. And how do I navigate that? How do I navigate that in my own views and my own faith and how I teach my kids? And so I have a really good friend and mentor who is on Substack. Her name's Tiffany Torres Williams. She runs the Project 2025 Takedown page. She's switching over to writing about purity culture and evangelicalism and deconstructing faith. And she's my good friend from like where I live. So we talk every day about a lot of this stuff and how to maintain your faith, but recognize some of the flaws in it, right? Recognize
Mhm.
that we're taught that the Bible is word for word the word of God, and you don't question it. And then sitting and reading it to your kids and realizing that women are the enemy and all these things that say people base their faith on that are two words on this page, but they ignore this half of the book. It's just a lot of human translation of old texts and where do I stand in that and what is my faith based on all of that and how do I feel and how do I navigate. And so I am very open. We go to a very open church now. We switched as we moved from Montana to New Jersey, which also makes a big difference. We now attend a church that's participates in like pride events and is very open to who can attend and who's allowed, and like just down to the idea of allowing your children to have communion. Whereas I grew up and you're like, they can't touch that, they can't eat that because they haven't accepted Christ. Or like it's and just the idea that no, they can participate. Like there's
Mhm.
not this structured environment that says you're out and you're in. But it does take a lot of learning and growing and deconstructing and not feeling guilty. I think there's a guilt aspect when you say, but I changed over here, but does that mean that I don't belong over here? And it the last 9, 10 years have been very difficult with that. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle with voting, especially if they don't understand politics as well, is there has really been this gigantic link of if you are a Christian or a person of faith, however you want to define that, that you have to be a Republican now, that is the
Right.
party of faith. And it's a message of disinformation that has frightened people, honestly. They think they have now put their politics next to or as high as their religion, which is not a good idea. It's very dangerous. Um, those two things are things that need to be kept at a dull roar.
Mhm.
So I write about that, and I write about it honestly. I will probably, if this stuff we're writing about now ever calms down, I'll probably talk more about kind of my history with that because I used to go to Mars Hill in Seattle, which has a long history. I'm very separate from that now and like the idea of Mark Driscoll, but also at the time when I was there, we weren't in a real politically hostile environment. And I think that opens your eyes to a lot of things and how people treat each other and what people think. We were just at a time when it felt kind of calm and easy, and then the Obama years, and so we went to church and we didn't question as much. And now we're going, wait, I need to question this part more because now I'm living it. Now I'm seeing it. Now I'm seeing how it affects my neighbor. Now we're having a conversation about trans people and how do I stand up for them? Like how do I am I complicit? Am I quiet? Or am I actively holding someone up so that they're safe and healthy and happy? And so yeah, it's a process. It's a process. It's not something that I think was intuitive for me. Um, but I have to recognize my flaws. And then I have to just recognize ignorance and room to grow. And I'm not there yet. I don't think I'll ever be 100%, I did it. But it's something that I want to take a more active stance versus I just support quietly over here. I think that's probably been the biggest piece for me.
So if you're listening to this and you have grown up in the way that you have, do you have any suggestions for people who are having that kind of guilt or don't quite know how to take a next step, or what was the thing that released you into being able to move forward in a different direction?
Hmm. I think listening more than talking, I would say. There's a lot of communities that you don't even realize are in your community. I think a great place for people to recognize how great their communities are is go to the library and look at their bulletin boards and all the coffee groups and book groups and support groups and just see who's out there and who needs your help. um, Make yourself a little bit uncomfortable, right? If you want to change and you're growing towards something, but it's still you still have that innate, not innate, but that environmental gut view of the way you were raised that something's not okay. Like if you grew up in the church and you're told that gay people are bad, right? This is a sin, even if you know that's not true, and even if you want to work towards helping and growing and loving and accepting that that feeling in your chest takes a long time to like that knot takes a long time to unravel. And so it's getting a little bit uncomfortable and spending time with people and just listening more than talking. I have had a great opportunity in my life, and this I don't think this is something I really struggled with, but I grew up in a very kind of blue collar logging coastal West Coast town, very middle class. A lot of people worked at the mills. Um, but we had a trans convention since 1990, which doesn't make any sense for my small town, but it's just been there since 35 years. And so we all grew up knowing, I mean, they were a little, it was a little bit of a spectacle, but it wasn't a scary, bad, or sinful thing. And so kids just grew up and going, oh, they're back, every May, oh, they're back. And now we're filming a documentary about it. And I've gotten to spend a lot of time with the women just sitting and listening to them interview and talk about their lives and the things that I don't realize that other people struggle with because it's not my struggle. And that's been really, really good for me. That has opened my heart so much to things that I didn't know it was closed off to just realize that someone else is just right there and they are just as quote unquote normal as I am, right? If I'm normal. Um, but just relaxing into that idea that we're all here and it's
Yeah.
gonna be okay. And that is it. I think that's been really good for me. Um, like I said, to open up areas of my heart that I did not know were closed off. And that's yeah, I've really loved that very much.
Was there a moment where you kind of felt the opening, like, I've been closed off to this, but, maybe there's something I I'm
Sure.
missing,
Sure.
or was it just, gradual, or just you always knew, like, trans people were around because there was this convention, and so that wasn't,
Mhm.
like, a thing for you? How did that work for
I
you?
think it was a little bit of the cultural shift of the idea of a cross-dresser to a trans person, which, society at large has taken that shift and understanding, different terms like bigendered and transgender and drag versus transgender, performative versus um, a heart level. This is who I am, non-binary, things like that. But for me, I have a person in my life who I am very close with who came out as transgender, and this was several years ago. And they're not a hugely communicative person, so it was kind of a quiet interaction. My immediate response is, I want to know everything. Sit down and talk to me. Tell me how you got here. Where is your head with all this? And they said, "No, not right now. I just need you to say okay." And that was hard for me. Like, I'm a talker. I want to know everything. And they were like, "Well, I don't want to tell you everything. And I just need that to be okay." And I was like, "Okay." So that I had to kind of understand that that's okay, that you don't need the whole story to understand someone or love someone. But I also think recognizing a few things. Recognizing that a little bit of grief is okay when somebody comes out as transgender, not because it's bad in any way, but because you may struggle a little bit feeling like you're losing the person you know, even though you're meeting someone newer, better, wonderful. Um, and working through that, and how do you deal with that? Also recognizing that that burden is your own and not theirs, right?
Mhm.
If I'm feeling these feelings that I'm working through as I learn and meet and grow with this new person, not putting those feelings on them because they're struggling with their own heavy burden during this time as they work through that process. Um, and then also the things like language, like learning new language and things like they them, that's hard, but it's not impossible. And it's really, pronouns. The whole pronoun conversation is silly to begin with because
We all have
we have
protein.
pronouns in the English language. The idea that they don't exist is a little silly. Um, but it's muscle memory. It's just growth. And my daughter helps me go, "Oh, mom, remember they, not,"
Oh,
and that's really helpful for me. And I'm
right,
glad because it's just muscle memory. It's learning new parts of language. And so yeah, it was a gradual process for me, and it was definitely a growing process. But I have to say that feeling of grief has gone away, right? I don't feel sad about it anymore. I feel very happy, and I feel like I can be a better support because I've taken the time to educate myself on my own and not required this person to educate me. Um, I I'm always looking for more veins of education and support for families of
mhm,
transgender people. I know they're out there, and I know that we're probably not looking in the right places, but I think that's something that would be great to just grow, so that people can be better support without needing their family members to just train them and carry them along because they
right.
have a burden of their own to take care of, and that's their business.
Mm, they do. It's really interesting. I have a high school senior, and a lot of his friends are genderqueer in one way or another, and sometimes he'll be like, pronoun check,"
Right,
and
right,
or I'll be like, "Okay, this person, pronouns?" And he'll be like,
right.
I don't know.
Yep,
Think
right,
it's
right.
he, him, but I
Yeah,
can't tell
they
you for
them
sure."
until you know, right?
Right? And so it's been a thing
Mhm.
that he has a lot of people in his circle,
Right.
um, that are, in the queer community, so, like, he's sort of been immersed even though,
Mhm.
he's sort of adjacent to it, and it's helped me, but I have to say it it does become muscle memory, but I think as we're the older of us,
Hmm.
and I'm a lot older than you are, but the like, I have much less trouble with pronouns for someone who has transitioned completely,
Hmm.
um, than the they them, like, because,
Right.
like,
Oh
my
yeah. Right.
my
Yeah. The
my
English
brain is
background.
in binaries,
Right.
right? And so,
Right. Well,
like,
and we're all taught that they is plural, and because as children, I remember as kids, we'd say they're coming over, and someone would say, no, she's coming over, because like intuitively we said they for everything, right? They
right.
wasn't a plural, and now we're unlearning that. But I also think with kids, like any generation of kids, kids learn the things that are common sense in their generation much faster than their parents, right? And you can think of this as like when you look at a little kid pick up an iPhone and they know exactly what to do. Like my 8-year-old is coding, like he knows how to code, and I'm just like, what? But like that's an intuitive thing that's just common sense at their age. And when I talk to my older two about like, when we were in high school, kids had to like really come out of the closet, and it could be dangerous for them. It could be scary for them. There was a lot of homeless kids because parents didn't handle it well, kick their kids out of the house. And it's such like they can't understand that concept. They're like, why? Like we know tons of kids who are gay. Like, why is that even a big deal? Like people don't come out anymore. They just are. And I was like, I know that's now, but that wasn't the way it was when we were growing up. But it's really interesting because the idea of the pronoun thing is common sense for them. Like it's
Mhm.
not hard for them. It's just rolling off the tongue because they're already learning language anyway. Meanwhile, we thought we were all established over here, and now we're relearning. But you do what you got to do.
I wonder, I mean, you're in New Jersey now. Was it different in Montana? Because 'Cause I'm in Massachusetts, and
Okay.
long before I moved here, lived in California, so I've actually never lived in
Hmm.
um, any sort of red area, which
Hmm.
makes me very privileged
Right.
and sheltered in a lot of ways. So, was it different there? Or is Montana such an independently minded thing that it wasn't an issue?
Montana is a strange place. It's wonderful. If you took the politics out of Montana, it would be perfect. It's just beautiful and glorious, and I miss it every day. When we moved to Montana, politics were very quiet. And again, I'm a straight cis white woman. I'm sure they weren't for everyone, right? But people's politics were their own business. When we moved to Montana, you didn't judge people based on politics. There were no flags flying out the backs of people's trucks. Like there was none of this divisiveness. The Trump years really changed a lot of the way people think and what they were entitled, how they were entitled to act. And um, so where we lived kind of adjacent to a very red county, and our kids went to school in that county, and it is a struggle because you have really, really, really good and close friendships with people who absolutely do not think like you do. There was not outward racism, like we didn't hear racism, but we also lived in a place where there wasn't a lot of diversity. It was a lot of little blonde white kids. Um, and the thing that I struggled with there, and you saw this a lot during COVID, is people assume what you think. And so they'll just launch into a conversation of, don't you just hate that we are being told all these lies, blah, blah, blah. And I would have to be like, well, actually. um, and so it is a struggle to live. And I've never even enjoyed this because we lived in Seattle before that. I don't really love living in a place where everybody thinks relatively the same thing. um, I like a little bit of diversity of thought so that because that's how you have conversations and that's how people's eyes are open to new things, right? Like if we lived in a place where people equally believed on all sides of the spectrum, we could have great conversations and be more informed. Um, so I think, but I also think that living in Missoula, which is where we were just outside Missoula. Missoula is a very liberal college town. It's Missoula County usually votes blue. They have had amazing No Kings protests, like 4 to 8,000 people, which is huge for
Wow.
Missoula. Like, they have really great arts and cultures. They have very good authors that come out of Missoula. So it was a good place to be close to. Even our church that we went to there it was fairly open. I wouldn't say that it was totally open, but like we had a huge Congolese community. Um, it was a church that was big into like the foster care system and providing without question providing for people in need. And like I really and they were some a church that refused to put an American flag at the front, which I that's the first thing will get me out the door. If somebody puts an American flag at the front of the church, I'm just like, that is not, nope, that's not why I came to like worship today.
Right.
Um, and so I think we had it pretty good for living in Montana, but Montana is extremely rural. You get a lot of people who move there to live off grid for whatever reason. It's one of those places where people love to say, "Oh, everyone's moving from California." It's not, but you get a lot of people like Rupert Murdoch and these kind of creepy billionaires who will buy up land there. I was searching to see if Jeffrey Epstein had a property because I was like, I feel like he must have had a property, but he did. He did look for land there. He didn't move there, but he was thinking about moving there. So it's just kind of a weird. It's a place to hide. I think Montana is a little bit. Um, when you're in the cities, there's no cities, but like Bozeman,
Mm.
Helena, Great Falls, Missoula, you'll get more of that blue to purple voting range, and you get a little bit of more diversity. You get diversity in like native tribes. They have a lot of native tribes. But I think it was just a wild change when Trump became president. Like it's just, I don't think it was something that any of us were ready for, and how much it divided community.
Do you think in that community, um, Trump brought out things in people that were already there, or do you think that Trump, uh, sort of initiated a change in people?
I think I think it's hard to make a racist out of a person who's adamantly not racist. I think I think he gave people permission to say things that were quietly taught to them over time from older generations, um, or like the things that they may have joked about quietly but didn't really concern themselves with. Um, yeah, like if you grew up in a home that was open and welcoming, and the immigration thing really blows my mind. That's the thing that really blows my mind because I feel like that is something that people changed a little bit about.
Well, you said that there was a
Um,
big Congolese community there. I mean, that was an
is
immigrant community, so
right, a huge immigrant community, and I know that that was, you know, our pastor didn't get involved in politics, but when Trump would say things like, they're sending their people from the prisons in the Congo to the U.S., that's a problem because they had a really big, really active, really wonderful Congolese community that obviously was not coming from prisons and insane asylums or whatever Trump said they were coming from. But I couple of things. I see people all of a sudden jumping on this fear of immigration and fear of immigrants. And these are people who have grown up with people their whole lives who are immigrants and obviously not, murderers and rapists. But we live in a very immigrant heavy community. I would say every kid that my kids hang out with has at least one parent who immigrated to the US from, white countries and brown countries. Like we have lots of
wow.
Polish and Russian, and kids have to get out of basketball practice early to go to Polish school, and we have a very big Hasidic Jewish community. Like it's a very diverse community, but you will hear like at our bus stop, we're probably one of two white families at our bus stop, right?
Are you talking New
And
Jersey or Montana
New
now?
Jersey, yeah, New
Okay.
Jersey, yeah, not Montana. um, and these families have three and four generations living under one roof, right? The grandparents and the great grandparents now live with their kids and grandkids, um, and came from some non-English speaking country, right? Usually some South American, Central American country. And you will still hear their kids who are adults talking about how they're pro-Trump and they're supporting Trump policies. And I just want to look at them and be like, I don't understand. I don't understand the hierarchy within immigrant communities about who did it right and who's doing it wrong. Um, because our entire community is made up by immigration. Like nobody would be here. Like
Right.
we're the whitest people here. Like it's wonderful. Um, and that's confusing to me. That I feel like is a shift because people embraced immigration, like especially where we live in New York City, and New York City is doing a pretty good job about immigration. Like I mean, they can't deny that it's an immigrant heavy city, and they don't support ICE. But like, where would we be? I mean, Ellis Island is within sight. Like, where would we be without all of this? And whose family didn't immigrate here? Like the Native Americans. That's it. Um, so I don't understand that part of the conversation. I don't understand a lot of the conversations, but like that I don't understand because I feel like I hear a lot of people turning on their own families. And I just want to be I just don't understand.
Have you had any of those conversations with questions like that with anybody who's close to you, or just imagined having
I think it's more
them?
imagined. We're still relatively new here, and a lot of people have it's for being so close to New York City, it is that kind of typical very small town where people have lived here for 30 years and everybody and everybody knows everybody's business. And so I still feel very new, even though I'm getting to know people, but I still feel very new. So mostly it's imagined and and it's also like hearing their kids repeat these things at the bus stop. So their kids are hearing the conversations at home. And I think, you know, your great grandma lives with you and she doesn't speak English and she's wonderful and she walks you to the bus every morning. And like hearing, you know, a third grader talk about I want to be like Trump when I grow up. And it's yeah, I don't know. I'm obviously not gonna have that conversation with a child, but
No, no,
yeah,
no.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
one of the things I think a lot about is, like, how do we I mean, there are diehards that we're not gonna ever reach, but
Hmm.
we share a lot of the same values with a lot of
Hmm.
people, and how do we lead with our values so that we're not talking about politics? We're
Hmm.
talking about our values as opposed to talking straight about politics, so
Sure.
instantly having that divisive,
Well, I just think
moment,
we've forgotten how to do that, you
I
know?
think we yeah. I
We
mean,
just
that's one of the
it,
things I wanna maybe remind people are possible, or
hmm.
a lot of people, I've talked with Andrew Watkins, who's
Hmm.
on Substack. She's another, recovering evangelical who has a really large community. Before the election, it was very, like, how 2025 will ruin your life. Project 2025
Hmm.
will ruin your life.
Yep.
And and so we talked a lot about, well, how do you have a talk about politics without talking about politics? Because, um, the other side has figured it out,
Right. It's a lot of show don't tell, right? Um, I mean, never before in our lives did we lead friendships with our political views as
right?
we do now. We were always raised that when you sit down at Thanksgiving dinner, you don't talk about politics or religion, right? Even back in the day when it really didn't matter as much. Um, we've forgotten how to be friends, and I think you know, and part of that is justified when you know somebody is voting for something, or especially if they're really active, like actively promoting something, and it takes down some group of people, whether that is based on their race or their gender or gender identity or something like that. That's hard. That's hard to be like, well, we're gonna hang out. Um, but I think a lot of the people, and especially when you live in a community that's very like a liberal city, let's say you live in a very blue city, you forget that a lot of the people who voted for Trump on the other side are not these flag waving, screaming white supremacist MAGAs. They're people who do not understand and don't see the things that they're having to vote on. So they don't live in an immigrant heavy community. They just hear that New York is a very, very dangerous place and they're trying to help, right?
Mhm.
I can tell you that I walk around New York all the time by myself
Right.
at night, feel safe. I've never had a problem. Um, and so it's a lot of either head in the sand or they don't know how to gather information. Everybody's capable of it. I don't want to say that, this is it's okay to do certain things because they didn't know. I don't think that's okay. But I'm also not one of these people. You see all these videos now, that's the FAFO videos about people, you know, finding out after the fact what they voted for. And yes, they did have the information. I'm not this wildly academic, highly intelligent person. I just did my homework, right? I knew how to look things up and I read. Like reading is so important. I cannot stress this enough. If you don't read anything, go read something. Um, and so I think a lot of the people that I talk to and I'm good friends with, especially back in Montana, are very gentle. They're very kind and they're very gentle and they're misinformed. But also, when we get together, it's about our kids and about like what they're doing in school and what our plans are for the summer. And, look, we're doing this to our house. Look, we put a new room on our house. Come see and like come over and make Christmas cookies. Like that's what friendship was before 2015, right? That's how we navigated the world was we had communities built on 1,000 things and not built on this one thing. And I think that's something that we've really, really lost. Now, that's not to say you hide your politics or you stay silent when you see there's a problem or when somebody brings up something that's inappropriate or that you know, at your core level know is wrong. Um, but I would say most good people don't lead with politics when you come over and make Christmas cookies at their house, right? They're not bringing up, did you hear what Trump did on TV? Like most people in most communities say, "Oh, this is not the time or place for that. Let's spend time together." And that gives me hope because I am someone who says, I see that you've been walking this line over here politically and you've been voting for things that I adamantly disagree with, but I will always keep a place for you over here to change your mind, right? I will never shut the door on you. But I think of someone like a Michael Cohen, and this has been brought up a lot. So Michael Cohen was Trump's lawyer. Now he's on the other side of the story. And it takes a long time to trust people,
Mhm.
especially if they're not just a voter on one side or the other, but if they're a soldier, right? If you're a soldier for Trump and then you switch sides and you say, "Oh, I've seen the light," it's going to take me a minute. I have a spot for you. I'm glad you're here, but it's going to take me a minute because what made you change your mind? Is it because you got in trouble for something, right? Is it because something hurt you personally, or is it because you recognize something was hurting someone else? Because those integral pieces of our core human anatomy that tell us how to care for someone else over ourselves, like that takes a minute to change. That may never change. And so but I don't know a lot of people who are a Michael Cohen. I don't know a lot of soldiers for Trump. I know people who are growing up in small, very white communities, going to church on Sunday. Their kids all go to small rural country schools and they live in a vacuum. And it may take something affecting them. Like most kids of most families that I knew in Montana were on something called Healthy Montana Kids, and that's their Medicaid for kids. And most people's kids are on it. And it has a very, it has a relatively normal middle class paycheck limit depending on how many kids you have. And we were on it for a while with our youngest. It's very common and it's something that was started a long time ago. And if that is taken away, that will affect a lot of people and
Right.
they don't realize that.
Well, my guess is that they don't know that
Is
is
Medicaid,
Medicaid, right?
right? Because
Here
it's not
it's
called
called mass
Medicaid, right?
it's called not called Medicaid almost anywhere. Here it's
Hmm.
Mass Health, California it's Medi-Cal, those are
Yeah,
the places I know, but,
right.
um, yeah. So,
And
yeah,
it's
I
not
spend a
set
lot
up
of
to
time
be
thinking about information and how do we break through
right.
um, and I'm still, trying to walk the line of, like, um, when I'm talking with other people is do I wanna, like, talk about society as a whole and history and vision,
Hmm.
or do I want to stick with how do we reach people? And
Right.
I'm sure I'll be somewhere in between. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's really hard when you can see all the mis and disinformation that's getting to
Right.
them because the entire right has captured so much media, and the
Right.
legacy media has just
Yeah.
um
They're
agreed
afraid. Yeah.
that they're
And that the interesting thing, because like I work with a lot of legacy media on like the newspaper level. Like I just worked with someone on an article at the Washington Post. I regularly work for the New York Times and the LA Times. Um, and there are obviously massive things that I disagree with. I do not like Jeff Bezos. I don't like what he's done to the opinion column. But there's a vast difference between the administration at the top of the legacy newspaper and the actual journalists that are working very hard down below. They're not paid very much. They don't sleep a lot. Their entire lives are spent fact checking because if they missed one single small thing, they can lose their job. And then they sit there and receive death threats all day for the writing that they do. So it's a tough business, and it's why you see a lot of people switching over to independent journalism, whether it's their own choice or whether they've been booted out, like someone like Jim Acosta or Don Lemon. Um, but they're very, very filtered. They're not allowed to say the thing that they think. And kind of back to the Epstein story, an example of that is Vicky Ward again. She used to work for Vanity Fair, and she wrote an article very early on in the 2000s about Epstein. And, it was kind of supposed to be this glowing article about a, billionaire bachelor in New York and so mysterious and this and that. But in the process of writing it, the Farmer sisters contacted her and said, he sexually abused us, and we're one of several women that this has happened to. And so she had his phone number. She was calling him, and she brought it up, and she started to write about it. And then she was about to have twins, so she's like in the hospital. And while she's there, Epstein showed up in her editor's office, and that portion of the story was totally pulled. And so she wrote this beautiful article, but the portion that mattered was taken out because of threat from the top. And that's a great metaphor for what's going on right now. Like you think of like a Cracker Barrel thing, like, you know, we almost made a change, we got a threat from the top and it stopped. And
yeah.
that's what we're dealing with on a larger scale with the newspapers is everything has to be approved by him, and that people have such fear of him, like that they're going to lose I don't really totally understand that, because I think when you have something like the New York Times, like their base is fairly liberal. Like I'm not really sure why they're worried about upsetting him, but I think
Well,
they're
the
thinking
people at
long
the
term.
top though do business
Yeah, do
with
business.
people that, do business. I mean, it's
Yeah,
at the end
right.
about money.
Right.
Which is why local and independent journalists,
Yeah.
I mean, somebody at some point called me a journalist. I'm like, I'm not a journalist, but I
I know.
thought,
I'm
you
just like,
know,
"Ugh."
but, you know, it's, I don't know. We're columnists. You're investigating for sure. I'm just,
I know. I'm just like, I'm
bringing people
writing, so
together
I'm
to
a
talk.
writer.
Exactly. Um, will you tell people how to find you?
Okay. Okay. Well, you can find me on Substack. However they do it, I'm under Ellie Leonard. I'm under at Red Pencil Script. I'm under the Panicked Unpaid Writer. If you just look that up, that's kind of my whatever it's called, my shtick. Um,
I
Anywhere on
totally, I
social,
totally feel you
right?
on the
Right?
unpaid
I'm like, I don't
writer
know. I don't
part.
know. You can find me most places as at Red Pencil Script because that's my small business. So that's on most social media. I'm dabbling in the live media world because I think that's where this stuff is all going. But I still, at my base, I'm a writer, and that's my intent. I also have ellieleonard.com, which is my writing website, which is a little bit small, but yeah, that's where you can find me.
Thank you so much for coming on.